Leave your house keys. You're not welcome here. That's what my sister said standing up at our family's Christmas party, her voice cutting through the clinking glasses and holiday chatter. She raised her wine glass like it was a toast, but her words were a blade. In front of our entire family, cousins, aunts, uncles, she declared I didn't deserve the house I'd built with my own money. My mom smirked, her eyes glinting with something cold. My dad just stared at his plate. No one spoke. The room felt like it was holding its breath. I didn't scream or beg. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my keys, and set them on my plate right between the roasted turkey and cranberry sauce. Then I looked at them, my sister, my parents, and said, "It's okay. The bank will be glad to see you." I turned, walked out into the freezing December night, and shut the door behind me. They didn't know the house was in my name alone, or that the next morning the bank would call them about a $1.2 million loan they tried to pull behind my back. That moment changed everything. If this family betrayal hits home, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment about the wildest holiday drama you've seen. Let's dive into how this Christmas party turned into my fight for everything I'd built. Let me take you back to where this all started before that Christmas party flipped my life upside down. I'm Jennifer Brooks, and I'd spent years grinding as an interior designer, taking every freelance gig to save for something my family thought was a long shot, a house of my own. Growing up in Asheville, North Carolina, I was the one who kept my head down. I got good grades, paid my bills, and never asked for help. Amanda, my sister, was the opposite, always chasing some half-baked idea, quitting jobs faster than she started them, and leaning on our parents to clean up her messes. They called her creative, the one who needed a safety net. Me, I was just Jennifer, expected to fend for myself. At 28, I found a beat-up craftsman house on the edge of town. It wasn't much: faded paint, creaky floors, a roof leaking in 3 spots, but I saw what it could be. I'd saved $60,000 every cent from late nights sketching layouts and picking out tiles for clients. No one else in the family gave that house a second thought. Amanda scoffed, called it a money pit. My parents didn't even bother to drive by. But I didn't need their validation. I signed the mortgage, $200,000, 30 years, no cosigners, just me. That first night, standing in the empty living room with a flashlight, I felt something rare: pride. Fixing that house became my everything. I learned to wield a sander, replaced every window myself, and spent weekends covered in drywall dust. I turned the sagging porch into a wraparound deck, painted the walls warm ivory, and built a kitchen island with my own hands. It took 3 years and every dollar I could spare. I'd come home from client meetings, throw on overalls, and work past midnight. Amanda stopped by, once glanced at the half-finished floors, and said, "Why bother? It's just you." My parents never showed up, too busy bailing Amanda out, rent, car payments, whatever she needed. When the house was finished, it looked like it belonged in a magazine. Oak floors glowed under skylights I'd installed. The backyard had a stone fire pit I built from scratch. Neighbors started dropping by, asking for tours. Suddenly, Amanda took notice. She'd call, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, saying, "That place is so big for one person." Or, "Imagine how happy my son would be with a yard like that." My nephew, her 6-year-old, was a sweet kid with a gap-toothed grin. She'd bring him over, let him run around, then hint they needed a stable home. My parents joined in. My mom would say, "You've done so well, Jennifer. You should share your blessings." My dad, quieter but sharp, asked once, "That house is a lot for one person to handle, isn't it?" I brushed it off at first. I wanted to believe they were just being family, maybe even proud. But their words lingered like a warning you don't heed until it's too late. I'd poured everything into that house: my savings, my time, my heart. It wasn't just a building. It was proof I could create something lasting, something mine. Yet every time Amanda or my parents brought it up, a knot tightened in my gut, like they were eyeing something I'd fought for alone. Looking back, I should have caught the hints. Their questions weren't random. They were calculated, setting the stage for that Christmas party when everything I'd built was nearly ripped away. After those early comments about my house, I tried to focus on my work, my routine, anything to shake the unease creeping into my thoughts. I'd spent years building that craftsman into my sanctuary, but Amanda's sudden interest and my parents' offhand remarks started to feel like warning signs. It wasn't just their words, it was the way they lingered, like they were testing me, probing for weak spots. I'd catch myself double-checking the locks at night, wondering why their questions about my house felt so pointed. Amanda started showing up more often, always with my nephew in tow. She'd walk through my living room, eyeing the skylights, running her hand over the oak banister I'd refinished. "This place is too much for one person," she'd say, her voice casual but sharp, like she was planting a seed. Once she brought up her son's school, how he needed a better environment, a bigger yard. "He'd love it here," she said, watching me closely. I smiled, offered her coffee, but my stomach twisted. She wasn't just visiting, she was sizing up my home. My nephew would race around the deck laughing, and I'd feel a pang of guilt for suspecting her. He was just a kid caught in her plans. Then my mom started calling. She'd never been one for small talk, but suddenly she was full of questions. "Do you have all the paperwork for that house sorted?" she asked one afternoon, her tone too sweet, like she was fishing for something. "You know it's a big responsibility owning property." I mumbled something about having everything filed, but her words stuck. Why did she care now? She hadn't asked about the house when I was tearing out rotten floorboards or maxing out my credit card for new plumbing. My dad was subtler, but no less strange. During a rare dinner at their place, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You ever think about putting the house in a family trust? It'd be easier to manage, easier for who I wanted to ask," but I just nodded, my fork hovering over my plate. The questions kept coming, each one a little bolder. Amanda called one evening, asking if I'd ever considered adding a co-owner to the deed. For tax purposes, she said, like she'd read it in a manual. I laughed it off, told her I had it under control, but my hands were shaking when I hung up. Another time, my mom dropped by unannounced, first time in years, and asked to see my mortgage papers. "Just to make sure you're protected," she said, her eyes darting to my file cabinet. I said they were with my accountant, a lie that came too easily. She didn't push, but her smile was tight, like she knew I was dodging her. By summer, their hints weren't hints anymore. Amanda started talking about her son's future, how he deserved a stable home, how my house was practically a family asset. My parents backed her up, their voices soft but insistent. "You've always been so independent, Jennifer," my mom said once, her hand on my arm. "But family shares. That's what we do." Shares what I thought? The house I'd paid for alone. The knot in my gut tightened, a mix of anger and dread. I started keeping my documents in a safe, not just the file cabinet. I'd lie awake replaying their words, wondering what they were planning. One night, Amanda texted me a photo of my nephew playing in my backyard, captioned, "This could be his home someday." That's when it hit me. They weren't just talking. They were building up to something bigger, something that would unravel everything I'd worked for. I didn't know what yet, but I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Their words, their visits, their questions, they were pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve, but I had to. That Christmas party was just months away, and I had no idea how far they'd go. By December, the unease I'd felt for months had settled into a quiet dread, like a storm you know is coming, but can't predict. I'd locked my documents in a safe, checked my mortgage statements twice a week, but nothing prepared me for what happened at our family's Christmas party. It was hosted at my parents' house in Asheville, a tradition since I was a kid. I walked in carrying a homemade pecan pie, hoping for a night of peace despite the warning signs. The dining room buzzed with cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone laughing, passing plates of ham and mashed potatoes, the air thick with holiday cheer. I forced a smile, trying to blend in, but Amanda's glances kept catching me off guard. Halfway through dinner, Amanda stood up, her wine glass raised like she was about to give a toast. The room went quiet, Forks pausing midair. "Jennifer doesn't need that big house all to herself," she said, her voice loud, steady, slicing through the chatter. "She's not even starting a family. It's not fair to keep it from those who need it, like my son." My nephew, sitting next to her, looked down, picking at his plate. My chest tightened, but I didn't speak. I looked at my mom, hoping she'd say something, anything. Instead, she smirked, her lips curling in a way that made my blood run cold. My dad stared at his napkin, his hands folded tight. No one else moved. Cousins froze. Aunts avoided my eyes. Uncles shifted in their seats. Amanda wasn't done. "Leave your house keys, Jennifer," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "You're not welcome to keep it all to yourself." The words hit like a slap, echoing in the silent room. I felt every stare, every held breath, but I didn't flinch. My mind raced months of their questions, their hints, Amanda's visits, my mom's fake concern about my paperwork. It all clicked. They weren't just asking for my house. They thought they could take it. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing the cold metal of my keys. I pulled them out, set them on my plate next to the untouched turkey, and looked straight at Amanda, then my mom, then my dad. "It's okay," I said, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "The bank will be glad to see you." Amanda's smile faltered just for a second. My mom's smirk vanished. My dad's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. I didn't wait for a response. I pushed my chair back, stood and walked out the front door, slamming behind me. The December air stung my face as I stepped into the night, my breath visible under the streetlights. I didn't cry or scream. I just kept walking, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and clarity. Their boldness at the Christmas party, so public and unapologetic, showed they believed they had me trapped. But I wasn't defenseless. I'd secured my documents in a safe months ago, sensing their intentions weren't innocent. I'd been checking my mortgage statements religiously, watching for any hint of tampering. As I walked away from my parents' house that night, I knew something was coming. The next morning, a call from the bank would reveal just how far they'd gone to claim what I'd built with my own hands. The morning after the Christmas party, I woke up in a cheap Asheville hotel room, the weight of Amanda's words still pressing on my chest. Her demand to leave my keys, my mom's smirk, my dad's silence. It all replayed like a bad movie. I'd barely slept, my mind stuck on that moment. I set my keys on the table and walked out. My phone sat on the nightstand, buzzing with unread messages from Amanda and my parents. I ignored them, splashing cold water on my face, trying to shake the anger and betrayal. I knew they were up to something, but I didn't know how deep it went. Not yet. At 8:17 a.m., my phone rang, an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "Ms. Brooks, this is Karen from First Asheville Bank." A woman's voice said, calm but urgent. "We need to discuss an issue with your property." My stomach dropped. "What issue?" I asked, gripping the phone. She hesitated, then said, "Someone attempted to secure a $1.2 million loan against your house, using documents with your name. We flagged it as irregular. Can you come in?" I froze, the words hitting like a punch. $1.2 million. My house was worth maybe $300,000 tops. This wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. I asked Karen to email me the details and hung up, my hands shaking. The email came through minutes later, a PDF attachment with scanned documents. There was my name, my address, but the signature wasn't mine. Close, but not mine. Someone had tried to forge it, tying my house to a loan I'd never applied for. Amanda's voice echoed in my head. "You're not welcome to keep it all to yourself." My mom's smirk, my dad's silence. They thought they could pull this off, use my house as collateral for a fortune. My comment about the bank last night wasn't just a jab, it was truer than I'd realized. I didn't waste time. I Googled property lawyer Asheville and found Sarah Newman, a name that popped up with 5-star reviews. I called her office, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling inside. "I need help," I told her receptionist. "Someone's trying to take my house. They squeezed me in that afternoon. Sarah Newman's office was small but sharp polished wood desk shelves packed with legal books. She was about 40 with a no-nonsense stare that made me feel like I'd found the right person. I handed her the bank's email, the forged documents, and told her everything: Amanda's demands, my parents' questions about my paperwork, the Christmas party showdown. Sarah leaned back, scanning the pages. "This is serious misrepresentation," she said. "They tried to leverage your property without your consent. We can stop this, but we need to act fast." Sarah explained the next steps, requesting a fraud investigation from the bank, pulling my property records, and filing a formal complaint. "Who do you think did this?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "Amanda," I said. "And probably my parents." Saying it out loud hurt like admitting a wound I'd ignored too long. Sarah nodded, no judgment in her eyes. "Family cases are tough," she said, "but we'll get to the bottom of it. First, we secure your title." I felt a flicker of relief, like I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Back at the hotel, I pored over the documents again. The forged signature was sloppy, but the intent was clear. Amanda and my parents had planned this for months, maybe longer. Those questions about my mortgage, the hints about sharing the house. It wasn't just greed, it was calculated. They'd used my nephew as a prop, banking on my guilt to make me cave. But they'd underestimated me. I'd fought for that house, every nail, every payment. I wasn't letting them take it. I called Karen at the bank, confirming I'd never authorized the loan. She promised to freeze the application and launch an internal review. "We'll need your affidavit," she said. I agreed, my mind already racing to the next step. Sarah had warned me this was just the beginning. Proving the fraud would mean digging into records, maybe facing Amanda and my parents in court. The thought made my stomach churn, but it also lit a fire. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't backing down. That night, lying in the hotel bed, I felt something shift. The betrayal still stung, but I had a plan. And I had Sarah. Whatever came next, I was ready. The weeks after the bank's call were a blur of paperwork and late-night calls with Sarah. I'd never been to court before, but now I was knee-deep in affidavits, property records, and emails from the bank. Sarah was relentless, digging into every detail of the $1.2 million loan someone had tried to pin on my house. I stayed in that Asheville hotel, avoiding my parents' calls and Amanda's texts. I wasn't ready to face them, not until I had answers. Sarah warned me this wouldn't be easy. "Family disputes get messy," she said, flipping through the forged documents. "But we've got a strong case. The bank's already flagged the misrepresentation." Sarah's team pulled my original mortgage records, proving I'd never authorized a second loan. The bank sent over more evidence: emails, application forms, even a digital trail showing someone had used my name and address. The signature was almost convincing, but it wasn't mine. Sarah pointed out inconsistencies: the handwriting wobbled, the dates didn't line up with my financial history. "This was sloppy," she said, her voice steady but fierce. "Whoever did this underestimated you." I nodded, my jaw tight. I knew who it was: Amanda, with my parents' backing. The thought of them sitting around planning to take my house made my chest ache, but I pushed it down. Anger was better than heartbreak right now. We filed a formal complaint against the loan application, naming Amanda and my parents as potential culprits. Sarah explained we'd need to prove their involvement in court, which meant a hearing. The bank cooperated, sending a representative named Karen to confirm the loan was flagged the moment it hit their system. "Your comment about the bank at the Christmas party," Sarah said, half smiling. "It was like you knew." I didn't, not really, but I'd sensed their plan was bigger than Amanda's words at that dinner table. The hearing was set for late January, barely a month after the party. I barely slept, replaying Amanda's demand, my mom's smirk, my dad's silence. Sarah prepped me for weeks: how to answer questions, stay calm, stick to the facts. "They'll try to twist this," she warned. "Make it about family, not the law." I wasn't worried about their words. I was worried about seeing them, about looking into their eyes and knowing they'd betrayed me. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, all dark wood and fluorescent lights. I sat next to Sarah, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Amanda walked in first, her head high like she hadn't done anything wrong. My mom followed, her face blank, no smirk this time. My dad came last, avoiding my gaze. My nephew wasn't there, thank God. I didn't want him caught in this. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes, called the case. Sarah presented our evidence, the forged documents, my mortgage records, the bank's testimony. Karen took the stand, explaining how the loan application raised red flags, wrong signatures, mismatched financial data. Amanda's lawyer argued it was a misunderstanding, claiming she'd only explored options for a family investment. I almost laughed. A $1.2 million loan wasn't an exploration, it was a calculated move. Sarah didn't let it slide. She pressed Karen, who confirmed the application listed Amanda as the primary beneficiary with my parents as co-signers. My heart sank, even though I'd known it was coming. They'd used my house as collateral, banking on me, folding under pressure. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, my voice steady. I bought that house with my own money, I said. I fixed it with my own hands. They never helped, never cared until they saw a chance to profit. Amanda shifted in her seat, her face tight. My mom stared at the floor. My dad's hands twitched, but he said nothing. The judge watched me, her pen pausing. Sarah followed up, showing emails between Amanda and a loan officer sent weeks before the Christmas party. They'd planned it all along, using my nephew as an excuse, my trust as a weakness. The hearing stretched on, with Sarah dismantling their defense piece by piece. Amanda's lawyer tried to paint me as selfish, hoarding a house too big for one person. Sarah countered with my financial records, proving every payment came from my account. By the end, the courtroom was quiet, the air heavy with tension. I looked at Amanda, waiting for her to meet my eyes. She didn't. My parents didn't either. They'd gambled on taking what was mine, and they were losing. The judge said she'd review the evidence and rule soon. As we left, Sarah squeezed my arm. "You did good," she said. I nodded, but inside I felt hollow. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about family, or what was left of it. 3 weeks after the hearing, Sarah called. "We got the ruling," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The judge voided the loan application. The house is yours, Jennifer. No liens, no claims." My knees buckled and I sank onto the hotel bed, relief washing over me like a wave. The bank's investigation had backed us up. Karen's testimony about the forged documents was airtight. The judge ruled the $1.2 million loan attempt was a clear case of misrepresentation, with Amanda and my parents named as the responsible parties. Sarah added, "They're facing penalties, maybe even a fraud investigation. You're clear." I should have felt like celebrating, but the victory was bittersweet. My house was safe, but my family wasn't. I drove back to my Craftsman that afternoon, the oak floors and skylights welcoming me like an old friend. I walked through every room, touching the banister. I'd refinished the kitchen island I'd built. This was mine, not because of a judge's ruling, but because I'd earned it. Still, Amanda's words from the Christmas party echoed. "You're not welcome to keep it all to yourself." My mom's smirk. My dad's silence. They'd tried to take it all, and for what? A quick payout. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Sarah met me at her office the next day to wrap up paperwork. "You've got options now," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "You could press charges, push for damages." I shook my head. The idea of dragging Amanda and my parents through another court case felt like sinking deeper into their mess. I just wanted it over. "What about my nephew?" I asked. He was the only one I still cared about, the only one who hadn't chosen this fight. Sarah sighed. "He's a minor, so he's not involved. But reaching out might be tricky with Amanda in the picture." I nodded, my throat tight. I missed his gap-toothed smile, his laughter on my deck. But he was tied to them, and I couldn't risk that. That night, I sat on my porch, the February air crisp against my skin. I wrote 3 letters. One to Amanda, one to my mom, one to my dad. I didn't mince words. "You tried to take what I built," I wrote to Amanda. "I trusted you. And you used my nephew to guilt me. We're done. To my mom. Your smirk at that party said more than words ever could. I don't need a mother who'd rather see me lose. To my dad, your silence was worse than their lies. I deserved better. I mailed the letters the next day, no return address. I didn't want replies. I didn't want apologies. I wanted a clean break. Cutting them off wasn't easy. I'd spent years trying to be the good daughter, the reliable sister, hoping they'd see me for who I was. But they only saw what they could gain. I called Sarah to confirm I wouldn't pursue further charges. I just want to move forward, I told her. She understood, her voice soft but supportive. You're stronger than they are, she said. I wasn't sure about that, but I was learning. I started small, changing my phone number, blocking their emails. I told my cousins and aunts what happened, not for gossip, but to set the record straight. Some reached out, shocked, offering support. Others stayed silent, loyal to my parents. That hurt, but it clarified things. I didn't need a big family, just one I could trust. My nephew was the hardest part. I set up a small savings account for him, something Amanda couldn't touch for when he's older. It wasn't much, but it was my way of keeping him in my life, even from a distance. Back in my house, I felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried too long. The victory wasn't just about the house, it was about reclaiming my life. Amanda and my parents could face their consequences without me. I'd fought for what was mine, and I'd won. Now I had to decide what came next, not just for the house, but for me. The road ahead felt open, uncertain, but mine to walk. A year had passed since that awful Christmas party, and I was determined to make this one different. I stood in my craftsman house in Asheville, the oak floors gleaming under the skylights I'd installed with my own hands. The smell of roasted turkey and pecan pie filled the air, mixing with the crackle of the fire pit outside. I'd invited friends, neighbors, and a few co-workers to my first Christmas party, hosted on my terms. No Amanda, no parents, no tension waiting to explode. Just people who'd shown up for me when it mattered most. As I set out plates on the kitchen island I'd built, I felt a quiet pride, not just for the house, but for the life I was carving out. Last Christmas, Amanda's words had cut deep. Leave your house keys, you're not welcome. My mom's smirk and my dad's silence had burned even worse. Walking out of that party, I'd felt alone, betrayed by the family I'd tried so hard to please. But now, standing in my living room, surrounded by laughter and clinking glasses, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Sarah, my lawyer, was there, sipping wine and joking with my neighbor about Asheville's winter chill. My co-worker Jess, who'd brought a homemade cranberry sauce, was telling stories about her kids. My friend Mark, who'd helped me repaint the porch last spring, was carving the turkey, his apron splattered with gravy. These were my people now, my real family, not bound by blood, but by choice. I'd spent the year rebuilding not just my house, but myself. After the judge's ruling secured my home, I'd cut off Amanda and my parents for good. Their letters sent months ago sat unopened in a drawer. I didn't need their apologies or excuses. They'd tried to take what I'd built using a forged loan application to claim a fortune that wasn't theirs. The bank's evidence, paired with Sarah's relentless work, had stopped them cold. My offhand comment that night, "The bank will be glad to see you," had turned out to be more prophetic than I'd known. But the victory wasn't just about keeping the house. It was about learning who I could trust and who I couldn't. I thought about my nephew often, his gap-toothed smile still vivid in my mind. He was 7 now, caught in Amanda's world, and that stung. I'd added to his savings account every month, a small gesture to show I hadn't forgotten him. I hoped one day he'd understand, maybe even reach out when he was older. For now, I had to let him go, like I'd let go of Amanda, my mom, and my dad. Cutting those ties had been painful, like losing a piece of myself, but it was also freeing. I didn't have to prove my worth to them anymore. I never should have had to. As the party hummed along, I stepped onto the wraparound deck, the fire pit casting a warm glow. Jess joined me, handing me a mug of hot cider. "You've got a good thing here, Jen," she said, nodding toward the house. I smiled, the warmth of the mug seeping into my hands. "Took a while to get here," I said. She didn't know the whole story, just bits I'd shared about family drama, but she didn't need to. She'd shown up with that cranberry sauce, no questions asked. That was enough. I looked around at the faces in my home, friends who'd helped me move furniture, neighbors who'd dropped off casseroles when I was stuck in that hotel, Sarah who'd fought for me when I couldn't fight alone. This was what family meant, I realized. Not the people who shared your last name, but the ones who saw your value, who stood by you when things got hard. My parents had called me selfish for keeping this house. Amanda had said it was too big for one person. They were wrong. This house was exactly the right size for the life I was building, for the people I chose to fill it with. The past year hadn't been easy. I'd questioned myself, wondered if I could have done things differently to avoid the fight. But every time I walked through my front door, saw the walls I'd painted, the floors I'd sanded, I knew I'd made the right choice. This house wasn't just a building. It was proof I could stand on my own, proof I didn't need their approval. I'd fought for it, not just in court, but every day I chose to keep going, to build something better than what they'd tried to take. As the night wound down, I raised a glass, my voice steady. "To new beginnings," I said, looking at the faces around me. "And to the people who make them possible." Everyone cheered, their voices filling the room with warmth. Sarah caught my eye, giving me a nod. Mark shouted to Jen's badass house, and the laughter that followed felt like a release, like letting go of the last shadows of that old Christmas party. I thought about what I'd learned, what I'd carry forward. Family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who shows up, who stays when the stakes are high. I'd lost the family I was given, but I'd found one I chose. And that was worth more than any house, any victory. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever had to fight for what's yours, or learn who your real people are, hit that subscribe button. Share your stories below, I'd love to hear them. Because at the end of the day, we're all building something, and we're stronger when we do it together.
It was too quiet, too polite, the kind of silence people use when they're waiting for someone to trip and already rehearsing their laughter. Grandma's 80th was supposed to be a simple family dinner. A long table, string lights, her favorite lemon cake. But as I walked toward the empty seat at the end, the only one left, I felt it. Eyes on me, like knives waiting for permission to be drawn. I hadn't seen most of them in nearly 2 years. Not since I cut contact. No dramatic blowout. No screaming match. Just a clean break after years of emotional manipulation, backhanded jabs, and being the family's punching bag disguised as a sensitive one. But I came tonight for Grandma, because she had never been cruel, never called me a failure, never rolled her eyes when I said I wanted more than the life they all settled into like quicksand. She greeted me first, hugged me too long, whispered, "I'm glad you came." I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. Then I saw my sister, Chloe. Same smug expression, same sleek hair and surgically perfect smirk. She didn't wave. She didn't even blink. Just leaned back in her chair like she'd already won something I hadn't even entered. Dinner moved slowly. Stiff conversation. Glasses clinking over bad stories. Then, just as dessert was being served, Chloe cleared her throat. "Before we dive into Grandma's cake," she said, "I have a little something to share." She pulled out a manila folder and tapped it on the table. "Since our dear Sabrina has been telling everyone about her amazing new life, her business, her big new success, I thought we'd take a moment to fact-check." Laughter. A few gasps. Dad chuckled into his napkin. My uncle leaned forward, hungry for drama. Chloe grinned like a woman who'd waited months for this moment. I hired a private investigator. Actually, two, just to see if all her stories added up. She looked directly at me. I mean, what kind of sister would I be if I didn't protect the family from fantasy? I didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just stared at her while she handed the folder to Grandma. Grandma's hands trembled as she opened it. First page, a header. Second page, a line of bold print. She read it. Her lips parted. She flipped the page again, and then her face changed. Not with confusion, not with embarrassment, with shock. She passed the folder silently to my father. His mouth tightened. He looked at Chloe, then at me, and for the first time in my life, he looked afraid. Chloe's smile began to crack, because the truth was written in black and white, but not my truth, hers. My name is Sabrina Lane, and from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me, because some lies come dressed as questions, but when the answers land on the table, they don't just ruin dinner, they burn the whole house down. Some people think betrayal comes loud, like slamming doors or screaming matches. But in my family, betrayal came with birthday cards signed, "Love you anyway." It came with compliments that doubled as warnings. "Wow, you really pulled that off. I didn't think you would. You're doing better than I expected. That's great. Just don't get cocky. You've always been emotional. It's hard for people like you to succeed." My sister, Chloe, was the architect of most of it. Polished, controlled, polite, even when she was cutting you in half. She always knew how to smile while she swung. I was the opposite, sensitive, earnest, always trying to prove I belonged at the table, not because they told me I did, but because they made me believe I had to earn it. I remember once in high school I got into a writing program out of state. I was thrilled. Chloe glanced at the acceptance letter and said, "You really want to go that far just to write about your feelings?" My mom laughed. "She's creative, honey. Let her dream while she can." That was the pattern. Every ambition met with a smirk. Every boundary seen as betrayal. Every success something they either minimized or tried to claim for themselves. When I finally left, not physically but emotionally, it wasn't explosive. It was quiet. One day I just stopped replying. To the group chats. To the guilt-laced calls. To the messages that weren't really questions but traps. I started a new life in a new city. I worked 3 jobs to stay afloat. I launched a handmade goods brand out of a 1-bedroom apartment with no heat and a cracked window. I didn't tell them about any of it, and that's what burned Chloe the most. Not that I failed, but that I might have succeeded without her watching. She didn't reach out when I disappeared from the family thread. She didn't check in when I missed Thanksgiving or Christmas. But when I posted a soft announcement months later, a photo of my small studio, a little gold plaque that read founder and maker, she messaged me within minutes. "Cute. Hope it's real." I didn't answer, and from that moment on I knew. She wasn't curious. She wasn't worried. She was threatened, because in our family the only way to win was to be the one with the story that stuck. And now she had hired people, literal strangers, to rip mine apart. She wasn't just trying to catch me in a lie. She was trying to drag me back into the silence I had finally escaped. But she didn't understand one thing. When you cut someone quietly, don't be surprised when they heal louder than you expected. The first night I slept in my car, I stared at the ceiling and tried to convince myself it was just temporary. A bump in the road. A detour. Not a destination. It was January. My breath fogged up the windows. I wrapped my coat around me twice and shoved a sweatshirt under my head like a pillow. No one knew. Not my parents. Not Chloe. Not the friends who liked every filtered photo I still posted to keep up appearances. If I had told them, I knew what I'd hear. "Why'd you move without a job?" "You always make things harder than they need to be." Well, this is what happens when you chase pipe dreams. So I told no one. I found a job at a diner, then another at a bookstore, then a third cleaning offices at night. I slept between shifts, ate soup from dollar cans, pitched my business idea to myself while mopping floors at 2 a.m. I designed my first product on a borrowed laptop at a public library. My second on the bathroom floor of the studio, I finally scraped together enough to rent. No furniture, just a mattress and 1 plate. And when I launched my shop, I cried over the first order like it was a lottery ticket. Because to me it was. But through all of that, every scar I stitched quietly, every small win I celebrated in silence. Not one person in my family called to ask how I was doing. They didn't ask, because they didn't want to know. As long as I stayed quiet, they could imagine the worst. That I was failing, that I regretted leaving, That without them, I was nothing. They needed that narrative, and I gave it to them for a while, because silence is a strange kind of shield. It hides your pain and their guilt. So when Chloe saw me posting curated glimpses, a glowing storefront window, handwritten thank you notes from customers, quiet Sunday mornings in a space I'd built with my bare hands, she didn't ask how I got there. She decided it wasn't real, because if it was, it meant she had spent her whole life mocking the one person who had done what she never could: leave, rebuild, thrive. And now, she was trying to expose me as a fraud. But what she didn't realize was that the life she thought was fake was the only thing in our family that had ever been real. The email came from an old coworker. Subject line: "You didn't hear this from me." Inside was a single sentence: "Chloe's asking questions about you, and not the kind people ask with love." Attached was a screenshot, a text thread between Chloe and a guy she once dated. He worked at a boutique PI agency downtown. She was asking for a full background sweep on me. I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop and made tea. Because when people go digging in the dark, they forget something. They don't get to control what surfaces. I didn't panic. Why would I? My life wasn't curated, it was carved. I had tax forms, receipts, LLC filings, shipping logs, vendor contracts, published interviews. I built this life with splinters in my fingers and silence in my lungs. But Chloe didn't know that. To her, I was still the girl who crumbled easily, who cried when Dad made jokes about real jobs, who said sorry too often for taking up space at the table. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to stop the investigation. I was going to help it. I dropped subtle posts on social, never lies, just breadcrumbs. A photo of me outside the business registration office, a tagged image with one of my investors at a networking event, a clip from a podcast interview where I talked about starting from zero. I even updated my LinkedIn, let her follow the trail. But what I didn't post, what I didn't say, was what I knew about her. Because here's the thing. When you grow up in a house built on secrets, you learn to pay attention. I knew Chloe lied about her master's degree. I knew she padded her resume, said she worked at a nonprofit that doesn't exist anymore. I knew she funneled money from our father's consulting business to cover credit card debt, then blamed it on a clerical error. And if the investigators were really doing their job, they wouldn't just be looking at me. They'd be looking at her too. I didn't have to fight, didn't have to scream or confront or confess. I just had to stay still, because Chloe had set a trap and never realized she was the one standing in the middle of it. It's strange how paper can silence a room. The manila folder Chloe slapped onto the table didn't look like much, but the way she smiled at it, like it was a weapon she couldn't wait to unsheath, said everything. "I thought we deserved some truth tonight," she announced. The air in the restaurant shifted. A few people sat straighter. My uncle actually grinned. My mother glanced down at her plate, already pretending she wasn't involved. Chloe slid the folder toward Grandma like she was dealing cards. "I hired 2 investigators," she said. "Just wanted to be sure our little success story here," she nodded at me, "wasn't too good to be true." The table tensed. Eyes shifted to me. I didn't blink, didn't flinch, just leaned back and watched. Grandma opened the folder with her usual grace, even though her fingers trembled slightly. First page, a copy of my business license, stamped, verified, clean. Second page, screenshots of my e-commerce dashboard, revenue, growth charts, customer testimonials, a note from one of the PIs that read, "Confirmed, LLC status active, taxes filed, no signs of fraud or exaggeration." Grandma looked up at me, slowly, and nodded once. Small but powerful. Chloe's smile was still there but twitching. She leaned in. "Keep going." So Grandma did. Third page. Photos. Not of me. Of Chloe. In an office that didn't match the nonprofit she claimed to work for. A copy of her resume highlighted, annotated with phrases like "no record of degree completion" and "non-existent organization." Fourth page. Bank transaction records. Transfers from Dad's consulting firm directly into an unregistered personal account under Chloe's name. The air changed, the kind of silence that presses into your bones. Grandma's hands froze on the page. My father went pale. My mother's fork hit her plate. And Chloe? She reached for the folder. Okay, this wasn't supposed to. Someone messed up. No one messed up, I said quietly. She looked at me, eyes wide. I met her stare. Calm. Steady. You wanted truth, remember? My uncle cleared his throat, murmured something under his breath. Grandma pushed the folder toward the center of the table. Then she turned to me and placed her hand gently over mine. I always knew, she whispered. I didn't cry, but something inside me unclenched. Because the justice I wanted wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen. And now, for the first time in my life, the room that used to swallow me whole was finally choking on the truth. I didn't say a word, and for once I didn't need to. The room was frozen, not with shock, but with the uncomfortable weight of clarity. The kind that doesn't just land, it lingers. The folder sat in the middle of the table like a live wire. No one touched it. No one looked at Chloe. Not yet. All eyes were on me. For the first time in my life, they were really looking. Not past me. Not through me. At me. Chloe laughed, a brittle, panic sound. Okay, come on. This is ridiculous. You think she didn't set this up? Obviously, she planned this. She manipulated the whole thing. She probably wanted someone to dig. No one replied. She tried again. Louder this time. She's not a victim, you know. She's always been dramatic. Obsessed with being the underdog. Still nothing. She looked at Dad. Say something. He shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, but said nothing. I didn't look at her. I just looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking. That was new. Chloe stood up, as if she could walk away from what was already on the table. This is insane, she muttered. You all are going to believe her now? After everything? Grandma's voice broke the silence. We believe what's in front of us. Her words were soft, but they cut through the room like glass. She turned to me, squeezed my hand. Her palm was warm, steady. I always knew you were telling the truth, she said. I just didn't know how much it cost you to do it alone. That's when Chloe's face truly cracked. Her mouth opened, ready to defend, deflect, destroy. But no one was listening anymore. They weren't turning on her. They were simply done. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even judgment. It was indifference. The kind that says we saw you. And now we've seen her. For the rest of the dinner, no one brought up the folder. No one asked me to speak. They just let me sit in the space I had earned. The space I had once begged for. And I didn't need to fill it with anything but presence. Because silence, when it's yours, isn't empty. It's power. And I had finally stopped asking for permission to hold it. I left before the cake. No scene. No goodbye. Just stood up, kissed Grandma's cheek, and walked out into the cold evening air without looking back. My heels clicked against the sidewalk like punctuation. Firm, final, unapologetic. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to stay and explain myself. Let them slice cake in silence. Let them sit with the truth they tried so hard to bury. That was never my weight to carry. 3 days later, my mother called. Twice. Then again. When I didn't pick up, she texted. Can we talk? I think we need to clear the air. I want to make things right. I stared at the screen for a full minute. I thought about the years I tried to earn that voice, that attention, that sentence, and how, now that I finally had it, it meant nothing. Not because I was angry, because I was done. I typed slowly. One message. Nothing more. You never believed in me until someone else told you to. Then I blocked the number. I didn't cry. I didn't feel proud either. Just clean. There's a grief that comes with letting go of hope, even the fragile, half-dead kind. But there's freedom too. I went home, lit a candle, and sat with the quiet like an old friend. Because when you've spent your whole life being doubted, overlooked, and picked apart, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is walk away without needing to be understood. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need closure from them. I had given it to myself the moment I stopped replying. And as the flame flickered beside me, I whispered one last thing into the dark. Goodbye doesn't always need an echo. The apartment smells like vanilla and cedar. My kind of quiet, my kind of clean. I slip off my boots, pour a glass of red wine, and drop my keys into the little ceramic dish I made in a beginner's pottery class last fall. The one that wobbles on the bottom but still holds everything just right. The windows cracked open. A city hum swells softly in background. No spotlight, no applause, just the life I built with bare hands and clear boundaries. I sit down at the desk where I launched my business. The same one I painted in soft sage and nicked with scissors during the first holiday rush. The same one Chloe probably thought didn't exist. My laptop dings. A new order. Handwritten journal. Custom inscription. Gift wrapped. I smile. Another stranger believing in something I made. Not because I begged them to, but because I created it well enough to speak for itself. I used to think validation had to be earned through performance. That success only mattered if it impressed the people who once doubted me. Not anymore. Real life doesn't need to be proven. It just needs to be lived. I take a slow sip of wine and stare out the window, the city lights reflecting in the glass like small constellations I no longer have to reach for. The world doesn't need to clap. It just needs to leave me whole. And as the night folds in quietly around me, I exhale. Not relief, not defiance, just peace. I am not the version of myself they remember. I am the version they'll never get the chance to know. My legs were shaking, and I was clutching a trash bag full of my clothes, not a suitcase. A trash bag. We were parked outside a gray brick building that smelled like mildew and rules. A woman in a navy sweater was waiting at the door, clipboard in hand, pretending not to see the tears I kept blinking back. Mom looked at me from the driver's seat, like I was a task she had finally crossed off her list. "You'll survive," she said, checking her nails. In the back seat, my older sister was scrolling through her phone. New acrylics. Designer bag in her lap. She didn't even look up. Dad just stared at the steering wheel like he wanted to disappear into it. They'd been telling me all week that money was tight, that things were complicated, that they had to make hard choices. But I already knew. They were choosing her. Again, choosing her ballet recitals, her prep school tuition, her birthday trip to Paris. And I was the sacrifice, the extra mouth they didn't budget for. Mom leaned over and opened the car door from the inside. "Come on, Maya. Don't make this dramatic." I stepped out slowly, bag in hand. The door shut behind me before I even reached the steps. No hug. No goodbye. No, we'll come back soon. They just drove away. I watched their silver SUV turn the corner and disappear like I had never existed. The woman with the clipboard put a hand on my shoulder. "Let's get you settled in, sweetie." I nodded, but I didn't say a word. Because in that moment, I learned something most kids never have to. The people who are supposed to love you unconditionally sometimes don't. I was a ghost by the time I reached the front desk. A silent girl with big eyes and a garbage bag for a suitcase. No one from my family called that night. Or the next. Not that week. Not that month. Not that year. They had made their choice. But so would I. My name is Maya Rivers. And from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me. Because the girl they left behind, she didn't disappear. She learned to build an empire out of everything they threw away. I used to think love meant staying quiet. That if I didn't complain, didn't ask for too much, didn't cry when things were unfair, they'd see me. I was wrong. From the beginning, my sister Amelia was the headline. The golden child, top of her class, trained in ballet, dressed like a catalog ad. And I was the footnote, her younger sister Maya always said with a shrug. When Amelia got straight A's, they framed the report card. When I did, "Well, you're only in 7th grade. Let's see if it sticks." She got braces, a tutor, a custom closet. I got hand-me-downs and lectures about not being a burden. One day, I overheard Mom on the phone. She was talking to my aunt, laughing. Maya is sensitive. She always thinks she's being left out. She'll grow out of it. But I didn't grow out of it. I grew through it, each year a little more invisible, each win smaller in their eyes, each need just a little too much. They called it tough love. They said it built character. What it built was silence. I remember coming home with a certificate from school, most determined. It was nothing big, but it was something. I held it out at the dinner table, hoping for a smile. Mom glanced up and said, "Is that for everyone?" Dad didn't even look. Amelia smirked. I got that in 5th grade. I folded the certificate and put it in a drawer. Never brought anything else home after that. But it wasn't just favoritism. It was something darker. Like they had decided early on who was worth betting on, and who was just extra weight. When Amelia turned 15, they threw her a full-on gala. Caterers, a string quartet, a rented hall. When I turned 12, they gave me a cupcake and said, "Don't blow all the candles at once." 2 weeks later, they left me in foster care because she needed them more. Those were Mom's words, delivered with a smile like she was being generous, as if abandoning your child was an act of love when it was done for the right sibling. And the worst part? For a while, I believed her. I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't lovable. Maybe Amelia really did need them more. But that belief? That was the last piece of them I ever carried. Because when people like that call it love, what they really mean is, you're only valuable if we say so. And the second you stop needing their validation, you become dangerous. The first night in foster care, I didn't cry. I thought I would. But there was something about the quiet, the unfamiliar sheets, the distant hum of someone else's television that made the grief settle into a dull, steady ache. Like my body had already adjusted to being unwanted. My new foster mom, Miss Callahan, was kind in a cautious way, the kind of woman who had seen too many kids come and go to get attached easily. She gave me my own room, a small space with pale yellow walls and a squeaky bed. "This is yours now," she said. I nodded, didn't speak, didn't believe her, but she didn't push. And slowly, without meaning to, I started breathing again. She cooked dinner every night. Simple food. No lectures. No forced smiles. Just presence. I got used to the routine. School. Chores. Homework. No birthday banners or ballet recitals. But also no smirks. No silence sharp enough to slice skin. I started working by 14. First at a corner store. Then babysitting. Then dishwashing. I saved every cent. No one was coming for me. So I built forward, step by step. I got through high school with no parties, no prom dress, no cheering crowd at graduation. But I graduated. With honors. Applied for scholarships. Wrote essays late into the night. Learned how to file taxes before I learned how to drive. College wasn't glamorous. It was a small in-state program with too many people and not enough parking. But it was mine. I studied business by day, cleaned offices by night, and sold custom-designed tote bags on Etsy for my dorm room. By my senior year, I had saved enough to take a risk. I turned my side hustle into a full-time plan. I didn't post about it. Didn't tell Ms. Callahan until after the launch. Didn't even consider telling my parents. They hadn't reached out in years. Not for holidays. Not for birthdays. Not even when I turned 18 and officially aged out of the system. But that silence, it stopped hurting. It started clearing space. Because as painful as it was to be forgotten, it gave me one rare gift. No one expected anything from me. No legacy to uphold. No image to protect. No hand-me-down dreams to chase. I had nothing, which meant I could build everything. And by the time my name was on a business license, by the time my brand started showing up on eco-boutique shelves, by the time strangers were wearing something I created, I realized something important. I wasn't surviving without them anymore. I was thriving because they were finally gone. The first time someone called me ma'am, I looked behind me. It was the UPS driver dropping off a bulk order of packaging for my business. He handed over 3 boxes and said, "Thanks, ma'am. Congrats on the growth." I stood there in my little sunlit workspace and just smiled. Because for the first time, someone saw me not as a girl who was left behind, but as a woman who had built something. The brand started with tote bags, then reusable pouches, then eco-friendly planners, then collaborations. Within 3 years, I had a modest but loyal online following. I was still operating small, still doing my own bookkeeping, still folding shipping boxes at night. But I was profitable, debt-free, and registered as a real business in 3 states. I never changed my name. Didn't hide. Didn't shout either. Just kept showing up. And as my business grew, something strange started happening. I began to get invited into spaces I once thought were locked to people like me. Small business panels, podcasts, trade expos, networking circles with designers and founders I used to admire from a screen. People introduced me as the girl who made it from nothing. They didn't know the half of it. I never shared the full story, never named names. But I didn't have to. I was building a life that spoke louder than any family legacy. And the best part? I wasn't doing it to prove them wrong. I was doing it because I had finally, quietly, learned how to believe in myself. Then one day, something came across my desk that stopped me cold. A struggling luxury retail startup, the kind that used to laugh at eco-conscious homemade brands like mine, was seeking new investment. Their numbers were tanking. Their leadership was fractured. They needed cash fast. And on the pitch deck under strategic advisors, I saw a name I hadn't read in years. Amelia Rivers. My sister. Apparently, life hadn't turned out quite as curated as she'd hoped. That's when it hit me. They were circling the drain. And I was one of the few investors in the room with the leverage to decide what happened next. I didn't rush. I didn't slam any doors. But I did lean in. Not to save them. To see what people do when the person they left behind is suddenly sitting at the head of the table. I didn't reach out. I didn't send an email. Didn't return the ones I received. But I read them. The first one came from a generic account. To whom it may concern, we are seeking potential investment partners to stabilize and rebrand our luxury platform during an upcoming relaunch phase. It was cold, corporate, desperate if you knew how to read between the lines. I knew. 2 weeks later, I got another. Different sender, different tone. Hi, Maya. I believe you, and I may have crossed paths before. I'm Amelia Rivers, currently advising on the Luxora project. We're in an exciting phase and exploring strategic investors aligned with our values. I stopped reading after that. Luxora, the same company that once denied a collaboration with me, said my handmade products weren't brand appropriate. The same company my sister now worked for after her influencer path fizzled out, her brand sponsorships dried up, and her perfectly filtered life began to crack offline. They were broke, not struggling broke. Their lead investor pulled out. Their CEO quietly resigned. A legal dispute was brewing over misused funds. And my sister? Listed as creative advisor, but functioning more like a desperate mouthpiece. Pretending to hold a title when the company barely had walls. And me? I was one of the anonymous decision makers on the board reviewing their last chance funding request. They had no idea. Until the pitch call. They hosted it virtually. I kept my camera off. My name listed only as our Lane Ventures, the investment arm I had quietly built under a different name. Amelia presented. Her voice was practiced. Too bright. Too fast. She talked about redefining luxury and partnerships with sustainability-forward brands. I sat there, letting her sell a future she had once told me I'd never be part of. Then someone on the committee spoke up. There's concern about previous mismanagement. Can you speak to the misuse of marketing funds from Q1? She froze. Someone else added. We also flagged an academic credential discrepancy on your advisor's resume. It says Stanford, but we couldn't verify enrollment. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I let the silence stretch. Let her squirm. After the call, a summary email was sent to all stakeholders. Luxora's funding request was officially declined. I watched the notification pop up on my phone, then turn it off and walked outside. The air smelled like rain. I didn't feel powerful. I felt done. Because this wasn't revenge. This was gravity. The golden ones had finally fallen. And I didn't have to push. All I had to do was stand where they left me and grow roots. The first knock came on a Tuesday. I had just finished packing orders when the intercom buzzed. Hi, it's Amelia. For a second, I thought I misheard it. Her voice was shaky, smaller than I remembered. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity? It's persistent. I buzzed her in and waited by the door. When I opened it, she was standing there with a paper bag of pastries, like we were friends catching up after brunch. "Hey," she said, eyes darting around the doorway. "Can I come in?" I didn't move. "Why?" She paused. "I just wanted to talk." She looked different. Designer clothes traded for something neutral. Clean face. No camera-ready glow. She was unraveling and trying hard not to show it. "I know you probably hate me," she said, "but things are hard right now." I didn't speak. She continued. "Mom and Dad lost the house. Investments dried up. We're trying to figure things out. I thought maybe—" There it was. The reason. "I thought maybe you could help us," she finally said. She said us, like we were ever a we. I stepped out and gently closed the door behind me, leaving her outside on the mat. "I'm sorry things are hard," I said. "Truly." She looked relieved for a second, like maybe I was going to rescue her. "But when I was 12, I continued, things were hard for me too." She looked away. "And I didn't see any of you then." "I was a kid," she muttered. "I didn't understand." "You understood enough to watch me be left behind," I said, "and never once ask where I went." She flinched. "I built everything I have without a safety net," I added. "Now you want to borrow mine." "I'm not asking for much," she said, quiet. "Just something to help us get through this." I reached into the mailbox beside the door and pulled out an envelope I'd prepared days ago. I handed it to her. Inside was a list of resources: housing support, job placement agencies, financial literacy programs. All real, all helpful. "Start here," I said. "It's what I did." Her eyes filled with tears. "You're really not going to help?" "I am helping," I said, "just not in the way you hoped." And before she could say anything else, I went back inside and locked the door. I leaned against it, closed my eyes, took a breath that felt 10 years long. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt clean, because healing isn't about proving you're better. It's about finally knowing you don't owe anyone the version of you they never bothered to believe in. The next day, I got a voicemail from my mother. It started with a sigh. "Maya, I know we've had our differences. I'm not proud of how things went, but your sister told me she saw you, that you gave her some pamphlets." She made it sound like I handed over junk mail, not the same resources I had once used to survive. "Look, your father and we made mistakes. We admit that, but we're still your family. We're reaching out now. Isn't that what matters?" She paused, waiting for her own words to sound noble. They didn't. "I just think if you're doing so well, you could maybe help us. Not forever. Just for now. You owe us that much." That part stung, not because I believed it, but because I knew she did. They really thought I owed them something. For the food they gave me until I turned 12. For the roof they folded over my head before they took it away. For the childhood they treated like a loan I was supposed to pay back with my future. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Later that week, I got a text from my father. Short. Formal. "We could really use your help. Your sister said you're doing well. We're proud of you. Proud of me. After ignoring every birthday. After walking away like I was someone else's problem. Now they were proud because they were desperate." I typed one line and hit send. "You said I'd survive." I did. That doesn't mean I'm yours anymore. And then, without a second thought, I blocked their numbers. No ceremony. No warning. Just silence. The kind that protects. Not punishes. Because this wasn't a comeback story. It was a closing. Not a scream. Not a slap. Not revenge dressed as kindness. Just a quiet, clean goodbye. It's been a year since they came knocking. They haven't tried again. Maybe they got the message. Maybe not. But either way, it's no longer my story to worry about. This morning, I had coffee with Ms. Callahan, my foster mom. We sat in her tiny backyard garden. She brought out a mismatched mug and a plate of shortbread cookies, just like she did when I was 14 and trying not to cry over algebra. She still asks how the business is doing. Still brags about me like I'm her own. Still signs every birthday card with, "Love you like always." And now I believe her, because she showed up when it was hardest to love me. I fund her rent now. She doesn't ask. I just do it. Quietly. That's the thing about chosen family. You choose to show up. And they do too. I mentor young girls aging out of foster care now. Some of them think I'm lying when I say I used to sleep in a room with yellow walls and a trash bag for a suitcase. They laugh when I show them photos of my first tote bag design. But they listen closely when I say, you don't have to come from anything to become something. Every time I say it, I mean it more. The apartment I live in now isn't huge, but it has floor-to-ceiling windows that catch the sunrise just right. There's a wall covered in handwritten thank you notes from customers around the world. And on the top shelf sits one thing I keep just for me. That folded up, most determined certificate from 7th grade. The one no one celebrated. Except me. I look at it sometimes when I forget how far I've come. And on nights like this, when the wind is soft and the world is finally quiet, I write. Tonight's journal entry was short. They left me, but I didn't stay lost. I became my own rescue story. I don't dream of revenge anymore. I dream of peace, of rooms filled with people who don't need proof I belong, of love that doesn't come with terms and conditions. I wasn't their first choice, so I made myself mine, and I've never looked back.